The tower still stands. The illuminations still glow. Millions still visit every year. And yet Blackpool ranks as the single most deprived local authority in England. 10 of the country's 20 most deprived neighbourhoods sit right here, and more than half its children grow up in income-deprived households. How did a place that never stopped drawing crowds become a district that couldn't stop declining? The answer begins over a century ago. Steam trains brought the crowds. By the 1860s, Blackpool's shoreline was no longer just a windswept stretch of sand, but a magnet for working people from Lancashire's mills and factories. The North Pier opened in May 1863, offering a place to stroll above the waves and breathe in the sea air for a few pennies. 5 years later, Central Pier arrived, quickly becoming famous for its amusements and the towering big wheel. The Winter Gardens opened in 1878, a glass-roofed palace where visitors could escape the weather and enjoy concerts or dances all year round. In 1894, Blackpool Tower rose above the rooftops, 518 feet of iron and ambition, modelled on Paris's Eiffel Tower, but built for everyone, not just the elite. The first official illuminations display in 1912 turned the promenade into a river of electric light, drawing families long after summer had ended. Each landmark was designed for repeat visits, for affordable spectacle, for the promise that anyone could join in. The town grew not from industry or finance, but from the steady rhythm of packed trains and bustling guest houses. Blackpool's lively image was more than showmanship. It was the engine of real economic life, powered by the hopes and pay packets of ordinary people. Tourism powered Blackpool's economy for generations. By 2011, around 11,000 people held jobs directly tied to the visitor trade, roughly 19% of all employment in the borough. Hotels, guest houses, arcades, shops, and restaurants provided steady work. But most of these roles were seasonal, part-time, or paid at the lower end of the wage scale. The town's prosperity depended on this single sector, with livelihoods rising and falling alongside the ebb and flow of holidaymakers. Unlike cities with factories or finance, Blackpool's economic base was narrow. There was little industry to cushion the town when visitor numbers dipped, and few alternative careers for those not working in tourism. The rhythm of the year shaped daily life. Summer brought a surge of jobs and energy, while winters meant layoffs, empty guest houses, and shrinking pay packets. Even at its busiest, the town's apparent wealth was thinner than it looked. The money that came in during high season rarely translated into long-term security for most residents. This over-reliance on tourism created a fragile prosperity. The same attractions that drew millions also left the town exposed, with so many livelihoods tied to a single, vulnerable source of income. The result was a community that seemed lively and successful on the surface, yet carried the risk of sudden hardship just beneath. By the mid-1970s, the foundations of Blackpool's success began to shift. Package holidays to Spain and Greece, once a luxury, became accessible for millions of British families. The lure of guaranteed sunshine and low prices drew holidaymakers away from the northwest coast, draining the crowds that had filled Blackpool's guest houses each summer. Flights from Manchester and Liverpool airports grew cheaper every year, and travel agents advertised week-long getaways abroad for less than the cost of a seaside stay. At the same time, the old pattern of week-long or fortnight holidays faded. Families who once booked a full week in Blackpool started to come for just a night or two, or even just the day. Investment in the town's accommodation lagged behind changing expectations. By the early 1980s, many hotels and guest houses were tired and underfunded, unable to compete with the comforts of new resorts overseas. The opening of the M55 motorway in 1975 seemed like a gift, a fast, direct route from the M6 straight to Blackpool's promenade. But easier access meant that more visitors could drive in and out within a single day. The town became a classic day trip destination. Visitor numbers held up, but the value of each visit dropped sharply. Day trippers spent less on food, entertainment, and almost nothing on accommodation, leaving local businesses with thinner margins and less incentive to reinvest. Over time, these pressures showed up in the numbers. Between 1995 and 2008, Blackpool's economic output grew by just 2.6% per year, less than half the 5.4% seen across England. By 2008, the town's gross value added per head had fallen to only 59% of the national average. The problem was not a lack of visitors, but a deep structural weakness. Blackpool's economy was stuck in an outdated model, unable to keep pace with a country that was moving on. Rows of guest houses once promised a warm bed to every visitor who stepped off the train. But as overnight stays dwindled and day trippers filled the promenade, the town found itself with far more rooms than it could possibly fill. Local planners counted thousands of empty beds in the old tourist core, a surplus that became impossible to ignore. Council documents from the 1990s and 2000s openly acknowledged the problem. Too many holiday accommodation spaces, not enough demand. Instead of reinvestment, the answer was often conversion. Former guest houses and boarding houses, built for short-term fun, were divided into cramped flats or rented out as houses in multiple occupation. Low property values made these conversions cheap and easy, attracting landlords looking for a quick return rather than long-term stability. The result was a patchwork of fragile housing, where thin walls separated strangers and repairs were often neglected. From the early 1990s to the mid-2000s, entire streets shifted from holiday lets to low-cost rentals. By 2018, new licensing rules tried to bring order to the spread of HMOs, but the underlying stock remained poor. The House of Lords report on seaside towns singled out this cycle. Too much old accommodation, too many low-quality conversions, and a growing concentration of people with nowhere else to go. In the heart of Blackpool, a visitor might still see neon signs and painted facades, but behind them, the housing pattern had changed, bringing with it instability, transience, and a sense of being left behind. Official statistics now capture the scale of Blackpool's decline in stark terms. According to the 2025 Index of Multiple Deprivation, Blackpool ranks first among all local authorities in England for overall deprivation. This is not a story confined to a single troubled neighbourhood or hidden corner. Over 40% of Blackpool's local areas fall within the most deprived 10% nationally. The concentration is so intense that half of the 20 most deprived small areas in England are found here. The map of hardship stretches across the town, from the faded guesthouse districts to streets just blocks from the promenade. The crisis runs deeper than empty buildings or struggling businesses. More than half of Blackpool's children, aged 0 to 15, now live in households where income falls below the poverty line after housing costs are taken into account. This is not just a snapshot of the present, but a warning about the future being shaped for the next generation. The glossy facade of arcades and attractions stands in sharp contrast to the daily reality for many families. Deprivation in Blackpool is not a hidden problem. It is woven into the fabric of everyday life, visible in every official measure, and passed down from parent to child. Life expectancy in Blackpool now stands at 73.7 years for men and 79.1 years for women, figures that sit far below the national average and signal a deeper story than numbers alone can tell. Behind each statistic is a pattern. Low wages, insecure work, and poor quality housing form a cycle that narrows life chances from one generation to the next. John, once a performer at the Tower Circus and later a guesthouse owner, describes how steady crowds once filled his hall and rooms. As audiences faded, his guesthouse became a house in multiple occupation just to survive. Sarah, raising her family in a converted holiday flat, deals with damp that never gets fixed and health problems that never quite go away. For her, the promise of cheap rent comes with the cost of constant uncertainty. Dr. Aisha Patel, a local public health officer, points to the evidence. Clusters of mental health problems and substance misuse line up with areas packed with low-quality, unstable housing. In Blackpool, deprivation is not simply a result of neglect or a lack of care. The town was not abandoned by its people. It was trapped by an economic model that unraveled faster than anything new could take its place. The cost is measured not just in lost jobs or faded landmarks, but in years of life, in health, and in the futures that never fully arrive. Blackpool's bright facade still draws millions, but deprivation endures beneath the surface. When a town builds prosperity on a single economic model, collapse is swift and recovery slow. Today, the contradiction remains: a lively resort masking entrenched hardship. The real test is whether renewal can outpace decline. Share your thoughts below.